Brad's best friend bet him I'd cry when they handed me divorce papers at Christmas dinner. Women are just so predictable. He laughed. I signed right away, then gave them a wrapped gift. Their faces dropped once they opened it. You think she'll cry when she reads them? Nick chuckled from the living room. They didn't realize I was in the hall with a tray of drinks. My feet froze, my breath stopped, my pulse roared in my ears. Brad's voice followed, light and smug. She'll crumble. Women always do. That was 5 days before Christmas. Before we dive in, thanks for being here. If you think no woman should ever feel powerless in her own home, hit subscribe. It's free and helps us reach others who need strength, not silence. Now, let's keep going. But this story didn't start there. Not really. Things fell apart long before they bet on my tears. It started with laughter. Always laughter. You know I could leave you tomorrow, right? Brad would joke at dinner parties, eyes twinkling with fake affection as he rubbed my shoulder. Everyone chuckled. So did I. But inside, something shriveled, tightening like a knot behind my ribs. People didn't see how heavy those words were, how often they came, or how easily. They didn't notice I stopped wearing my red dress after he scoffed. Trying too hard, aren't we? Or how I'd check his tone before speaking in public, praying my sentence wouldn't turn into a speech about my flaws. He never yelled, never raised a hand. Brad was smarter than that. His words were blades dipped in honey. Don't embarrass me in front of my boss. You know you're lucky I'm still here. I mean, come on, what else would you do without me? Each comment came with a grin, a chuckle, a clink of his whiskey glass. I'd smile back. I had learned to smile. At first I defended him to friends. He's just sarcastic, I told Jessica, my childhood best friend, after she caught one of his remarks at a barbecue. He doesn't mean it like that. She didn't look convinced. He doesn't have to mean it. You look like you're disappearing. Maybe I was. I stopped posting on social media. I started missing book club meetings. Calls from my sister went unanswered more often than not. My world got smaller, centered around Brad's moods, his rhythms, his thresholds. He liked control, subtle control. When my mom came to visit, he made sure to loudly remind me how messy I'd left the kitchen. When I forgot to get the dry cleaning, he'd mutter under his breath, useless, just loud enough for me to hear, just soft enough to deny it. Still, I convinced myself this was marriage. Maybe not a fairy tale, but it was stable, long-lasting. At least he didn't cheat. At least he wasn't violent. At least. Then came the gala. We were 2 glasses of champagne into a company fundraiser when he turned to me, eyes glazed with alcohol and contempt. You're just like the rest of them, he muttered under his breath as the CEO walked by. Always wanting more, always clinging, needy. My mouth went dry. My face stiffened with that familiar flush of shame. I didn't ask what triggered it. I rarely did anymore. When we got home, he slammed the door and went straight for the liquor cabinet. I followed him slowly, poured him another drink, and handed it to him with a smile I'd perfected. You know, I said gently, maybe we should sign something just in case. You always joke about leaving. Why not make it official? He laughed. A deep, careless laugh. You really think I need a prenup to protect my fantasy football winnings? He scribbled his name on a napkin next to him. There, go get it notarized if you're that scared. Then he passed out on the couch. He forgot about that napkin by morning. But I didn't. I had it notarized within 24 hours. Jessica helped. She didn't ask questions, just looked at me with quiet understanding and handed me a pen. I folded that document and slid it into a fireproof envelope, then stored it in the back of a filing cabinet under a folder labeled Tax Receipts 2020. Then I emailed a scanned copy to a private email Jessica had set up for me years ago, just in case. That night, I cooked dinner like normal. I asked Brad about his day. I laughed at his impressions of his co-workers. I cleared the dishes and wiped down the counters while he scrolled on his phone. He didn't notice the way I'd started looking at him. Not with fear, not with anger, but with calculation. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in me. Not visibly, not dramatically, but I started keeping a journal. Not the pretty kind with quotes on the cover, but a plain spiral notebook I tucked under my side of the mattress. In it, I logged his comments, his moods, the date he came home at 10:15 a.m., reeking of perfume and tequila. I wasn't planning anything yet, not consciously, but that night at his company's New Year kickoff party, when he told a crowd of new hires, "My wife's hobby is overspending," I didn't cry. I excused myself to the restroom, looked at my reflection and thought, he thinks I'm soft, breakable. He wasn't wrong. I had been, but I was learning. A few months later, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jeans, 2 wine glasses, an expensive hotel room, and strawberries from room service. Dated Valentine's Day. We'd spent it apart. He'd claimed he was out of town for work. I didn't confront him. I scanned it, stored it, logged it. It became a quiet pattern, a private ritual, evidence, not emotions. At dinner one evening he said, "If we ever split up, you'll be crawling back. You can't even fix the Wi-Fi without me." I nodded, poured him another glass of wine and said, "That's true." I no longer believed it. There's a particular kind of silence that grows in homes like ours. It's not peaceful. It's tight, like a thread pulled through too many stitches, just waiting to snap. Every room echoed with conversations we never had. Every smile I wore came with a side of nausea. Then one night I woke to a nightmare, his voice in my dream echoing, "You'll have nothing." I sat up sweating, heart pounding, and something inside whispered, "That's not true anymore." I had the document, the timelines, and I had time. That was the night I stopped pretending. From that point on, I wasn't his wife, I was his shadow. Polite, polished, watching, preparing the joke he thought was harmless. The napkin he thought was just a drunken whim. That was my foundation. I didn't know when. I didn't know how, but I knew one day he'd go for the same old power play, and I'd be ready. I stood in Jessica's office, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above us, illuminating the sharp edges of a truth I wasn't ready to speak aloud. She stared at the document I handed her, the one Brad drunkenly signed without reading, without knowing. "Did he do this willingly?" she asked, eyebrows raised. I nodded, silent. Jessica leaned back in her chair, the leather groaning under her, then put on her glasses and began to read. After a few long minutes she looked up with something between pity and admiration dancing in her eyes. "It's elegant," she said, tapping the paper gently. "He gave you the knife, you're just deciding when to use it." I sat across from her, my fingers interlaced tightly in my lap. "I don't want revenge. I just want to feel safe." "You will," she said. "But let's reinforce this. Make sure it'll hold if he files first." And we did. She drafted an addendum, adding clarity where there was vagueness, ensuring that if Brad ever tried to twist the narrative, he'd be trapped by his own arrogance. We included provisions he'd never think to contest. Spousal protections, financial splits, evidence of voluntary signing. He had written his name, dated it in his handwriting. No coercion, no pressure, just a smug moment that became irreversible. Jessica gave me a flash drive, a printed copy, and a look I hadn't seen from her since we were kids plotting mischief behind our school library. Except this time, it wasn't mischief, it was war strategy, and we were playing the long game. "I'll hold on to a copy too," she said as I stood to leave, just in case. That night, I returned home to Brad watching a football game. Beer and half-eaten snacks were scattered on the living room floor. I paused at the threshold, watching him laugh at a replay, the TV noise bouncing off the walls like echoes from a life I no longer belonged to. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. He grunted in acknowledgement. That was the beginning of my performance, and I played the role better than I ever thought I could. I became the wife he bragged about, polished, pleasant, poised. When he commented on my spending habits in front of friends, I laughed along. When he bragged about his promotion at his company's annual party, I kissed his cheek and toasted him with a bright smile. Even though I knew he got the job because his supervisor wanted him gone from his current department, I no longer argued when he was cruel. I complimented his taste in wine, his choice of restaurants, even his new aftershave, though it smelled nothing like the one he used when we first met. He thought I was softening. What he didn't see was that I was sharpening. Brad began to relax again, believing the fire in me had burned out. His behavior grew more careless, more entitled. He started coming home late without excuses. Left his phone face up on the counter, messages flashing briefly across the screen from numbers saved without names. I saw one from Molly. It read, "Tonight, same hotel." He left for the gym 10 minutes later. I opened our shared laptop, synced his phone's data to my cloud folder, and forwarded the screenshots to the private email Jessica had set up for me. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I went to the kitchen and made lasagna, his favorite. He came home to a hot meal and a warmer smile. It was the best he'd eaten all week. At a barbecue a few weeks later, his best friend Nick cornered him near the grill, beer sloshing as he gestured animatedly. "She'll fall apart if you leave her, man." He laughed. "Too dependent. You've got it made." I was standing a few feet away, carefully arranging a fruit tray. I didn't flinch then either. Instead, I placed the strawberries in a perfect spiral, one red slice at a time. Brad joined me moments later and wrapped his arm around my waist, pressing a kiss to my cheek like he hadn't disappeared the night before without explanation. "You look beautiful today," he said. I smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." The day after the barbecue, I started recording phone calls, only the ones that mattered. The quiet conversations when he slipped up, said too much, laughed too hard at things no loving husband should laugh at. I labeled each file by date and stored them meticulously. I felt like a spy in my own home, but I wasn't seeking revenge, not then. I was building a parachute, quietly, carefully. Because when you live in a house made of cracks, You don't wait for it to collapse. You learn where to step and when to jump. I even bought a planner and began marking days with tiny symbols. An X for his late returns, a star for suspicious charges, a dot for lies I could prove. To anyone else, it looked like grocery lists and meal plans. To me, it was a map. Eventually, I stopped reacting at all. I became a mirror. He saw in me only what he wanted to see. A woman who'd stopped resisting, who'd shrunk herself to fit neatly into the narrow space he'd carved for her. And so he got bold. He started leaving cash out in the open. Large withdrawals he never explained. He went on business trips with luggage full of cologne and pressed shirts he never used for Zoom calls. One day, I found lipstick on a receipt. The shade was called Temptress Red. I wasn't offended. I made a note. The final confirmation came 2 weeks before Christmas. Brad had a few drinks and fell asleep on the couch with his phone unlocked. I glanced down as a message thread flickered to life. Molly. She doesn't suspect a thing. I'll file on Christmas. Want front row seats? Attached was a laughing emoji and a gif of a woman sobbing into a tissue. My fingers didn't tremble. My stomach didn't turn. I read the message twice, screenshot it, and emailed it away. Then I deleted it from the conversation entirely. That night, as I lay beside him, I stared at the ceiling and thought about candles, cranberries, and carved turkey. Christmas. He was planning my downfall like a party trick. He thought I'd break, but I'd already chosen the date, the witnesses, the setting. He wasn't the only one with a performance prepared because he'd forgotten something critical. When you hand someone a knife, you don't get to act surprised when they learn how to wield it. The Christmas table gleamed like something out of a magazine. Perfect, curated, falsely warm. A flickering garland framed the windows. Candles flickered in glass holders, and the roast turkey glistened beneath Brad's carving knife as he grinned like the proud patriarch. He wore the sweater I bought him last year, maroon with small reindeer stitched across the chest. The irony of that, me dressing the man plotting my undoing, wasn't lost on me. My sister Betty passed around her famous spiced wine, cheeks flushed from both the heat and the alcohol. Brad's parents chatted about their retirement plans. Everyone looked so content, so unaware. I moved among them like a hostess on autopilot, refilling glasses, smiling with my teeth but not my eyes. Beneath my dress my legs trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. My heart beat a steady rhythm. Tonight, tonight, tonight. Brad caught my eye once while slicing the turkey and winked. He had a look about him, overconfident, self-satisfied, the way he used to look before his sales pitches closed. I matched his smile with one of my own, warm and unreadable. Let him believe he'd won. Best bird yet, Brad's dad said, chewing with gusto. Sarah's perfected the recipe, Brad added, placing the platter on the table like a trophy. She's had plenty of practice. What is this? What is this? Our 7th Christmas? 8th, I gently corrected, sitting across from him. He raised his glass. Well, here's to 8 more, or however many we last. His voice had that cruel lilt again, the one he coded in humor to keep his jabs casual, deniable. Laughter rose around the table. I chuckled too, brushing a non-existent crumb from my napkin. As plates emptied and the buzz of wine settled into the room, I noticed Brad's best friend Nick whisper something in his ear. Nick was already tipsy, eyes glassy, smirk lopsided. Brad nodded and stood up slowly, tapping his glass with a butter knife. All right, he said, clearing his throat. Before dessert, I have a little something for my lovely wife. I glanced at Betty, who gave me a smile of genuine delight, expecting maybe a necklace or a handwritten note. Brad reached into his blazer, pulled out an envelope, and walked over with the smugness of a man who believed he was delivering a grand finale. Merry Christmas, babe, he said, placing it in front of me. A quiet chuckle escaped Nick. No one else laughed. The envelope was out of place. Plain white, no bow, no card. I looked at it for a moment before opening it calmly. The table hushed. My eyes scanned the first line. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Already signed, already filed. He had even highlighted a section at the bottom like a schoolboy showing off his work. I looked up. His smile was wide, expectant, so I smiled back. Thank you, I said softly, almost sweetly. A flicker of confusion passed across his face. Nick shifted uncomfortably beside him. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a sleek silver pen, clicked it, signed the papers in one elegant stroke, dated it, capped the pen and handed them back. Done. I could feel Betty staring at me wide-eyed. Brad blinked, caught off guard. That's it? He asked, his voice too casual. That's it, I echoed, sliding the envelope back toward him. Then, without missing a beat, I reached under the table and lifted a gold-wrapped box, placing it right between his plate and his ego. What's this? He asked. Your real gift? I said. He hesitated, then tore at the wrapping, revealing a leather folder. He opened it, and the moment he read the first line, the color drained from his face. His lips moved silently for a moment, reading, rereading, dated, notarized, unsealed, the prenup he had laughed through, signed with the same hand now clutching the edge of the table. "What is this?" Nick asked, leaning in. Brad didn't answer. "So, I did. It's the agreement Brad signed nearly a year ago. It's been updated, reinforced, and filed. But I filed first," Brad said, as if that nullified reality, which makes it legally binding under your terms. I replied with a calm smile. "Every asset, every clause, you gave it to me." Nick's mouth parted slightly. "Holy, you okay, man?" Betty's husband asked from across the table. Brad didn't respond. His eyes were still glued to the document. The same eyes that once scanned spreadsheets and contracts for inconsistencies missed this one glaring clause in his own life. And then I reached into my purse again. "One last thing," I said. I placed a small square envelope on the table, thinner than the first. He stared at it as if it might explode. He opened it slowly, brows furrowed. Inside was a sonogram photo. Brad looked at it, then at me. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice even. 8 weeks today. His expression cracked just slightly. His eyes darted around the table. For a fleeting moment he smiled almost involuntarily, but that smile withered the moment his brain caught up to his ego. Prenup, pregnancy, assets, custody. The room felt like it was tilting. The weight of everything he thought he controlled was now pressing down like a slab of stone. "You planned this," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I met his eyes, steady and cold. "You bet I'd cry." You laughed, called me predictable. "So no, Brad, I planned nothing. I prepared." The silence was thick, dense with the kind of realization that doesn't crash but creeps. I took a sip of my wine. The sweetness of cinnamon clung to my lips. Brad's mom pushed her chair back slightly, her face ashen. Betty gently reached for my hand beneath the table, her thumb brushing against mine in quiet solidarity. Nick tried to speak but ended up shaking his head and looking away. Brad stared at the prenup like he could rewrite it with sheer will. He couldn't. I stood slowly and began clearing the dessert plates that hadn't yet been filled. My hands didn't shake. My breath remained even. "Apple pie or pecan?" I asked the table. No one answered. Brad sat frozen, flanked by the wreckage of his illusion. And I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. Brad sat there, shoulders stiff, mouth slightly open, as if the words he just said had choked him mid-thought. "You planned this." But I barely heard him anymore. He was staring at the prenup in front of him like it was some ancient curse etched into parchment, only he'd written every line himself. The room was painfully quiet, except for the subtle crackle of the fireplace behind him and the slow clink of a spoon from the kitchen. Even the ornaments on the tree seemed to stop shimmering. Then his eyes dropped to the sonogram photo still lying in his lap. He looked at it like it might vanish if he blinked. The faintest twitch passed through his jaw. "Sarah," he started, but I stood straighter. "No, just one word. Calm but firm." He blinked slowly, like he was recalibrating what version of me he was speaking to. His voice cracked slightly. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, but I'm not doing anything," I replied, lifting my wine glass without looking at him. "You already did." To my right, Alex's mom sat hunched, her lips pressed tight, and the pearls on her neck shook a bit with each shallow breath. Alex's dad had taken off his glasses and was cleaning them with his napkin, even though they weren't dirty. Bella's husband almost grabbed more wine, but then changed his mind. Nick, still awkwardly at the table's end, scratched his neck, his smugness now crushing him like a broken roof. My cousin Lily stared at me across the table, wide-eyed, her spoon hanging between her mouth and her untouched sweet potatoes. I slowly scanned their faces, noticing every single expression. It was disbelief, shame, confusion, and awe. It was better than any speech. Their silence was the applause I didn't even need to ask for. Alex leaned back, running a hand through his hair. He did that whenever he realized he'd lost control. I'd seen it before, arguing with his boss, trying to get out of a late credit card payment, or when a deal failed and he had no one to blame. He looked around, like someone might save him. I didn't. "You thought I'd beg," Emily said quietly. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. "You thought I'd fall apart. You were half right." He looked at Emily again, his eyes narrowed. "I was," Emily continued. "Until today." He swallowed hard. That's when Emily saw fear creep in. Not the dramatic kind. No yelling. No tantrum. Just a tiny flicker. A sliver of something real in a guy who always thought consequences were optional. Alex opened his mouth again, but his phone buzzed on the polished table before he could speak. He glanced at it. Then it buzzed again, then a third time. He slowly picked it up, unlocking it with a shaky thumb. And then, there was the email from Sarah. Subject line, prenup confirmation, legally binding. Emily watched his face twist in slow, quiet horror as he read it. Every sentence peeled off a layer of his bravado. He scrolled his thumb fast, His lips parted, his face went pale. He reached the bottom, where Sarah had signed it with the firm's letterhead and her usual elegant touch. She even attached backup copies with metadata timestamps and all that. Relax, tell her it doesn't count, he muttered, gripping his phone like it might change. Another buzz. This time, it was from Alex's dad's email app. The subject line read, "Forwarded signed prenup dated documents. FYI. The man he once called a legal dinosaur just got proof that his golden boy had handed over everything on a silver platter." Alex lowered his phone like it burned him. Emily turned to Bella, who had been quietly watching everything happen. "I could really go for something sweet now," Emily said softly, almost cheerfully. "Can you pass the pie?" "Which one?" she asked, getting back to herself quickly. "Apple and whipped cream, please." As she started slicing the pie, Emily stepped away, went to the buffet and grabbed a clean plate. Alex's eyes followed Emily, still wide and still trying to figure things out. Emily went back to the table and sat next to her sister, gently putting the pie in front of her. From her seat, Emily turned to him one last time that night. "I'll get the locks changed tomorrow," Emily said simply. He looked like he'd been hit. Then Emily picked up her fork, took a bite of pie and smiled. Not to provoke him, not to show off, just because the cinnamon was warm, the crust was buttery, and the taste reminded Emily of something she'd long forgotten. Peace. Alex pushed his chair back, its legs scraping the hardwood floor. "You think you've won," he said. Emily didn't answer. He didn't deserve a reply. He stormed out, leaving the prenup, the sonogram, and what was left of his pride on the table. For a few seconds no one said anything. Then Bella sharply exhaled next to Emily. "I always hated that sweater," she muttered. Laughter rippled through the room, soft and uncertain at first, then growing louder. Lily laughed nervously. Even Alex's mom chuckled faintly, covering her mouth with a napkin, but then quickly looked away. Emily took another bite of pie and leaned into Bella. "Merry Christmas," Emily whispered. She rested her head on Emily's shoulder for a moment. There were no fireworks, no yelling, no overturned chairs or broken dishes. Just a quiet unraveling of power, measured by glances, documents, and one slice of dessert. The room changed that night, not because Emily changed the dynamic, but because she took it back. Bella stayed the night. After Alex slammed the door, she just looked at Emily and said, "You won't wake up alone tomorrow." She didn't need to say anything else. We slept in the guest room. Emily was curled on her side, one hand resting on her gently rising belly. Her hand briefly touched Emily's in the dark, wordless and warm. Emily hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath for the past few years until that night. When Emily finally exhaled, it felt like someone else's breath, someone she didn't know. By morning, Alex was gone. No note, no call, just silence. Emily came downstairs and found the coffee pot cold, the front door locked from inside, and his keys gone from the hook. Emily made herself breakfast for the first time in weeks without second-guessing the clink of her fork or the toaster popping. By 9 a.m., Emily had the locksmith on the phone. "Emergency or standard change?" "Standard," Emily said, then paused. "But make it quick." He came that afternoon, a quiet man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions when Emily gave him Alex's old keys and said, "Make sure none of these work anymore." When he left, Emily stood in the foyer with a new key and realized this was the first thing she truly owned alone in years. Not the house itself, no, not yet, but the feeling, the certainty of it. That evening, Emily moved into the master bedroom. It still smelled like his cologne, faint traces of something expensive and cold. Emily opened every window, let the December wind blow through, stripped the sheets, and put them in trash bags. Emily found an old box of sandalwood candles in the closet, ones she used to love before he said they gave him headaches. Emily lit 3, put them on the dresser, and watched the light move across the walls, like they were dancing just for her. The next day, his mail started coming with red stamps on the envelopes. Final notice, past due, immediate action required. Emily neatly stacked them on a side table by the door. She didn't forward a single one. Sarah called that evening, her voice practically bubbling. "You won't believe this," she said. "You will." Alex's lawyer called this morning. His face must have been priceless when he realized what you'd been holding on to. Emily smiled into the phone, curling up in her blanket. "Is it official?" "He lost 70% overnight," she replied. "And with a baby on the way," she paused dramatically. "He's going to write a check so big he'll need a payment plan." Emily's smile widened. Not for the money, not even close, but because Emily could finally sit in her living room without getting ready for a fight. "I'm proud of you," Sarah added softly. That almost broke Emily. "Thanks," Emily whispered, "for staying when I didn't even know I needed someone. You've always been strong, Emily. You just finally let yourself believe it." The fallout was quiet at first, like snow melting instead of an avalanche. Some friends unfollowed Emily. Some picked sides. A few sent Emily careful texts full of disclaimers and, "I'm not taking sides," but others were bolder. One message from a woman Emily hadn't spoken to in 2 years just said, "I wish I had your strength." A bouquet of peonies arrived at Emily's doorstep days later. No name, just a card. "About time. See Alex's assistant, Chloe." Emily smiled and put the flowers on the mantel. Of course she knew. It was just a matter of time before word spread at his office. The man who joked about training wives like interns suddenly lost his audience. His best friend Nick stopped laughing in meetings. The comments stopped. And the swagger. Apparently his team noticed he'd been leaving early, mumbling, and missing deadlines. Emily overheard Bella's husband on the phone with someone later that week. "No, man. He's been off, like haunted. Haunted. Good." The man who once said Emily would be nothing without him now walked alone at lunch, forgotten in a world that once rooted for his cruelty. Emily? She started buying lavender soap again. She painted the nursery soft sage green, a color he once called pointless. She hung tiny string lights around the window and put a stuffed giraffe in the corner. Emily started lighting candles after dinner and drinking herbal tea in the sunroom, barefoot and unbothered. One evening, Emily found herself humming while folding laundry, something she hadn't done since her second anniversary. Emily bought new bed sheets, white with tiny gold stars, and slept diagonally across the mattress because she could. One afternoon, Emily passed Alex on the street. He was leaving a bank, talking on his phone, and looked annoyed. He didn't notice Emily. Or maybe he did, but just didn't know what to say. Emily kept walking. Later, Sarah sent Emily a screenshot. Alex's firm had removed his name from their quarterly newsletter. Emily replied with just a thumbs-up emoji. Then, she made tea and watched the wind dance through the curtains. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about small things. Freedom, peace, slowly rebuilding a life that was Emily's, and the quiet realization that the woman he tried to break was now the one who'd rebuilt everything without him. The first time Emily felt her daughter kick, she was barefoot in the kitchen, humming to an old Nina Simone record while slicing peaches for a pie. It was so soft at first, Emily thought she imagined it, a flutter like a wing brushing the inside of her belly. Then, it happened again. Emily dropped the knife. Both hands flew to her stomach, and Emily stood there stunned and smiling, tears surprising her. It wasn't just a kick, it was a reminder, a rhythm, a message. You're not alone. Her daughter was real, growing, strong, and so was Emily. That night, Emily wrote in her journal for the first time in weeks. She kept the entry short, but deliberate. This baby will never hear yelling through a door. They'll never feel like they're walking on glass. They'll never confuse fear for love. Emily underlined the last line twice. Emily's world got smaller, but warmer, softer in all the right places. My cousin Olivia moved into the guest room during Emily's second trimester. She arrived with 2 suitcases and homemade lavender muffins, wearing her usual oversized hoodie and the same gold hoops she'd worn since college. "I'm not letting you do this alone," she said. "And besides, you need someone to stop you from eating pickles and ice cream together." We got into a rhythm almost right away. She worked remotely from the kitchen table, wore fuzzy socks in July, and didn't ask about Alex unless Emily brought him up, which she rarely did. That part of the story wasn't worth repeating anymore. Sarah dropped by every few days with groceries, warm casseroles, and baby name books with silly post-it notes inside. Page 37. Don't name her Tiffany. "Not because it's a bad name," she explained once, laughing over tea. "Just because I had a Tiffany in middle school who cut my hair with safety scissors during art class." We laughed more in those months than Emily had in years. We didn't talk about court filings, lawyers, or any of the old wounds Alex left. We talked about recipes, crib colors, the easiest strollers to fold, and if her ex was secretly stalking her Pinterest boards. It was the first time in a long time that silence wasn't something Emily feared, but something she shared. The baby's room slowly came together. Emily painted the walls soft yellow and filled it with thrifted furniture. She refinished herself, one coat of warm paint at a time. A rocking chair arrived in a huge box, and Olivia spent 3 hours trying to assemble it before throwing down the instructions and declaring, "This is your villain origin story." We laughed until our faces hurt. One quiet Sunday, Emily pulled a box from the back of her hallway closet. Emily knew what it was the moment she touched it. The soft rustle of the satin ribbon, the faint cedar scent clinging to the edges. Our wedding photos. Emily sat on the living room floor and opened it. There we were, frozen smiles and vows wrapped in white lace, his hands around Emily's waist, her eyes full of dreams that had since turned to ash. Emily didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. Emily slid each photo into a separate envelope and labeled the box, "To release." Then Emily drove to the donation center, handed it over without ceremony, and walked away feeling lighter. On the way home, Emily stopped at a bookstore and bought a blank journal with a leather cover and thick ivory pages. That night, Emily titled the first page, "Plans That Are Only Mine." Emily wrote in it every evening. Some entries were long, some just a single word, but everyone belonged to Emily. By the time Christmas came again, the house smelled like cinnamon and pine, not tension. The dining table was smaller and cozier. No fancy centerpieces, no wine glasses used to charm people. There was laughter, real laughter, the kind that just bubbles up easily. Bella brought her toddler, who kept dropping mashed potatoes and yelling, "Oh," like a magician pulling off a trick. Emily's dad carved the turkey while Olivia tried and failed to make vegan gravy. Sarah brought a date, her first in a year, and Emily didn't feel jealous. Emily felt full. And next to her sister's son sat a brand new high chair, white with little yellow stars, holding the love of Emily's life, her daughter. She might have had his eyes, but the rest, oh, was Emily's. Her cheeks were full and pink from the cold. Her tiny fingers gripped the edge of her tray while she babbled nonsense like it was the most important speech ever. Emily didn't spend the evening watching the door. She wasn't checking her tone. Emily didn't rehearse answers in her head or wonder if someone's compliment might cause a jab. Emily was present. Every bite, every shared glance, every story told between courses felt like a celebration not of survival, but of something new. After dinner, Emily curled into the armchair by the fireplace, her daughter asleep on her chest, her tiny breaths warming her sweater. Everyone else had gone to the kitchen or for a late walk. But Emily stayed, holding her, surrounded by the kind of peace that used to feel fictional. Emily took a sip of her cocoa and softly whispered to her. "He said, I'd be nothing without him." Her daughter stirred slightly, her fingers curling. Emily kissed her forehead and smiled. "Turns out," Emily murmured, "I'm everything without him." If this story of calm power and perfect timing gave you chills, hit that like button right now. Emily's favorite part was when she slid that gold-wrapped box across the table. What was your favorite moment? Tell me in the comments below. For more stories of strength, smart revenge, and emotional justice, subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss a moment.